Hey team, I wanted to do my blurb this month instead of writing it out in the newsletter. I decided to do it as a mini lecture. I've got a few good ideas and they're definitely bashing around in my head. I'd like to address all of them at some point. But this one that Kristen sent in was, when should I space my eating around activity? And it really made me think that perhaps the practical guidance, simple practical guidance that should be on the tip of everybody's brain is perhaps missing. So I thought I'd throw this together, and it's 100% based on the recommendations of CrossFit headquarters. Taught on a level 1 course, we do a nutrition piece. We're going to quickly look at that, and I won't even bother writing it up because I want to use the whiteboard more so as a way to visualize perhaps some of the meal timing pieces and quantity of food pieces. But at CrossFit, we say you should eat meat, vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. What I like to think of that as is eat real food that includes all of your macronutrients. So that's protein, present in meat in the most efficient way possible, carbohydrates, present in your vegetables, in your fruit, and in your starches. Eat also fats, which are in nuts and seeds in there, and other things as well. So we want to make sure we are eating carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Now, the no sugar bit essentially talks this idea that because really when CrossFit says sugar, they're saying sugar, not the sugar that exists in all carbohydrates, because carbohydrates can be processed or refined down and digested down into sugars, both simple and more complex. But they're saying like actual table sugar or soft drink or lollies. Piss that stuff off. And what I always like to think of is that direction that this eating paradigm will take you to is a north point. Eat meat, vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch and no sugar, and you'll do okay. If anyone has a problem with that, I would contest what is the worst thing that could happen to somebody if they ate like that. I'd be very surprised. If you're eating real food and moderating the amount of carbohydrate that you consume, you, in our opinion, CrossFit, and I use the royal hour in that instance, CrossFit's opinion, you are much less susceptible to all-cause mortality if you eat a diet that is closer to a paleo-style diet or a primitive diet. There is conjecture on that as well, but let's just start with the idea that I think it's a good diet. Brett from CrossFit Sisyphus thinks it's a good diet. The second part of it is often overlooked, and this is the bit that really talks to the question, and that's keep intake to levels that support exercise but not body fat. And I always interpret that as eat exactly enough. You want to make sure you got enough exercise, enough energy, fuel, substrates for your exercise, but you don't want to eat so much that you're storing it, or otherwise you're eating in excess. The demonstration of eating in excess on humans is they accumulate body fat. So rather than demonizing being fat, really what it's saying is don't eat so much that body fat accumulates, and make sure you eat enough that you can support the activity that you're choosing to do. So eat just enough. That's a tricky undertaking to work out how much food exactly do I need. And this is really what I wanted to talk about. When I started doing CrossFit and started working for CrossFit way back in 2009, the zone diet was exactly what we prescribed. Dr. Barry Sears came up with this diet that he, as a doctor, gave to his clients and patients, and they had tremendous success with it. He then interacted with Glassman and told him about it. They had success not only with people who were overweight, but also with athletes when they ate in this fashion. Now, the nutrition message from CrossFit has undergone a number of evolutions over the last 10 or 11 years that I've been with them, but the zone diet is still core to our values, and I think not necessarily because we 100% prescribe to everything that's in Sears' book, Enter the Zone. Have a read, it's an old book, but I think it's still got some gems in there, but more so because of the tool that it introduces. The tool that it introduces is the zone block. Now, a zone block allows us to look at a piece of food or a meal as being balanced in all the macronutrients. The zone block has carbohydrates, 9 grams of them, has protein, 7 grams, and has fat for 3 grams. If you want to get all crazy, we can see that this is also 40%, 30%, 30% calorically. So 9 times the 4.2 grams per calories per gram of carbohydrate jumps that out about 36, 37. Protein, 7 times 4.1 gives us about 28 calories from protein, and 3 times 9 is about 27. So yes, it's short, but it's around about 100 calories in a block. Because the primary macronutrient is the only thing that's really touched on, it works out to be about 100 calories per block. Now this little baby lets me now talk to you as an athlete and say, how much are you eating? You're like, I don't know. Well, cool, let's start off by determining how much do you need, full stop. You can do this by determining your lean body mass, LBM, which is an abbreviation for lean body mass, which is basically your total mass minus your passive mass or your fat mass. So if I'm 100 kilos, I'm about 95 kilos, and sit on 15, 20% body fat, then I could easily do the maths and say, well, say I'm 120%, then I've got 80 kilos of lean body mass. I've got to feed that lean body mass. That's muscle, that's organs, that's bones, that's things that need nutrients. And food is where I get those nutrients. So this idea of how much should I eat is largely born from your lean body mass plus how active you are. If I'm completely sedentary, I can just eat less than somebody who's working out, say, intensely every day. You can jump online and find basal metabolic rate calculators and get an idea of how many calories you need. What I think is a really simple way to do this is to find a start point. So practically, rather than try and determine exactly how much food you need and forget about all the possible variables, gender, age, current state of hormones, stress levels, exercise, what about how do I factor in the rest day or the no rest day, what if I'm playing sport and work, forget all that, just get a start point. What we suggest now is we say start on either 2,000 calories for ladies or 2,500 calories for dudes. 20 blocks for girls or 25 blocks for guys. That's a fair bit of food. And I think the reason we gravitated to this point is because a lot of people, when we looked at the zones, initial prescriptions went, it's not enough food. Who cares? It really doesn't matter as long as you have a start point. Now, you shouldn't stay at that wrong number forever. If you have a number that's too low, you're going to notice real quick. You might lean out, but you also are going to suffer from insufficient energy to do the tasks that you want to do. Remember that swinging idea of keep intake to quantities that support exercise? Well, if you're too lean, sure, you don't have body fat, but you may not have enough energy for exercise. Similarly, if 25 blocks is too much for me, what I'll notice is that I accumulate body fat whilst eating in this fashion, and hopefully I also have sufficient energy. So we're going to just keep tweaking it until it's just right. For all intents and purposes though, we need a baseline, and we need a start point, and we need to commit to sticking to that for a period of, 4 to 12 weeks, which is sort of this experimental design amount. If someone was going to do an experiment and expect a physiological response, you sure as hell can't make a accurate assessment of the impact of something, especially as long-term as a diet, off less than 4 weeks. And the longer you stick to it, the more likely you are to be able to accurately say, this is how I responded to this style of eating. So this is coming into the idea of quantity. I want to make sure I know how much I've got. I can do that via blocks. Zone blocks, which are 9, 7, and 3. As an example, this is a pretty lame meal. 9 grams of carbohydrate could present as half an apple. Plus protein, I can have 30 grams of chicken. And fat, 3 grams, 1 macadamia nut. Now, the reason that knowing that is important is that to answer the question of when should I eat before a workout, it's more than just when should I eat, it's also what should I eat, how much should I eat, and then how do I modify this? Because there are definitely, these are the variables that we're going to mess with. If I've got 20 blocks to play with, and I don't, I've got 25, based on what we said. Sucks to be a small person. The first thing I want to do is think about when do I want to train. So if I'm training at the moment and I'm doing a little session at 9:30, I need to factor in when am I going to eat before I work out. And why that's important is because if I eat too close to when I work out, then I'm potentially losing energy for working out to digestion. And that can also be a factor to consider with what do I eat before I work out. I might throw this into the wind and come up with a different plan such that before I work out I don't have much fat to enable me to have more rapid digestion, so that I'm not sitting there in the warm-up going, all right, I still feel sluggish and heavy. Or I choose to have the fat, I just have it earlier in the day. And again, I would listen to myself and say, geez, Brett, you're not really giving me anything to work with. But I'm saying, as your first protocol, what is your pre-workout meal and when is it time? To my 450 crew, this is probably going to be really small. It might even look like that. A little bit of apple, a little bit of chicken, maybe an almond or two. And that gives you something in your tummy, hopefully, at least 45 minutes before you start working out. That's not a prescription. I'm not saying everyone should do that, especially if you're allergic to almonds. That would be a terrible idea. But if you've got something now in a balanced piece, there's a couple of things I can do. Say you're training at 450, you go, one block has been consumed. Because one of the things to consider in a nutrition plan or a diet is you've got to eat enough food. This is another assumption. We require a certain amount of food to go about our daily tasks. It's the fuel, it's the raw materials, it allows us to keep progressing. So I've done one, I still got 24 in the bank. Life's pretty good. So I might have that before I work out, especially say I didn't wake up until just before I worked out. Let's make me a 450 person because they're the most awkward in more ways than just nutrition. So I have that when I wake up at 350, smash a little bit of food, boom, come here, potter around, an hour later I'm working out and hopefully I'm happy with how that digests. If I'm not, I keep changing it until I do. Maybe it's half a banana. Maybe it's half a banana. For me, it's not going to be yogurt because that doesn't digest real well. Maybe it's half a banana, a little bit of protein powder, and something else, some fat source, a bit of avocado. Mash that into a nice little paste and slap it on down. Regardless, I've got a block in. Now I've finished my workout at 450 and I want to eat pretty quickly after that. Now again, this is one of those assumptions because if you chase down research, you can probably find studies that support just about anything. Post-workout fasting versus post-workout eating in the anabolic window. But regardless, it's a fantastic time to eat in theory because now your muscles are empty and you can put some glucose in there. And I'm saying this based on things that I've read or been taught, not on any presumption of knowing something as a fact. But the theory is, post-workout, we can consume some carbohydrates because we need to replenish the intramuscular glycogen, the sugar or carbohydrate that lives within the muscle. And on the way in, it can drag some protein with it, which is always good for muscle repair. So having a meal after you work out is a good idea. Based on the idea of eat meat, vegetables, nuts, seeds, some fruit, little starch and no sugar, the best choice is a real food that ticks that box. What do we often see people do? They're going to take some sort of a supplement. But depending on when my next iteration of exercise is, or next thing that I want to feel digested for, or how I feel when I eat certain amounts of food, will dictate how much or how big that meal is. What we, in the zone, what he says is no more than 5 blocks at a time. And really, I guess the goal there is we're limited by how much we can digest. As soon as you put an arbitrary number in, someone is going to be fine with 6 blocks. Someone's going to be fine with more. Someone's going to prefer not to be ever at 5 and they're going to be at 3. That interperson variability is guaranteed, right, when we start talking about nutrition. So there are no rules really, there are just guidelines. The first guideline is have something to eat before you work out. Some of you might not, and you might be fine, in which case, go at it, all right? Success is dictated by how well you perform in workouts, when we start talking about nutrition, and how your body composition and health markers are. If those 3 things are fine, you shouldn't really be stressing about nutrition. But if either of those 3 or all of those 3 aren't where you want them to be, it's probably a good idea to address your nutrition in some way, shape or form. Post-workout meal, say I have a 4 blocker, I'm hungry, and I have that at 7 o'clock. I've now got 5 blocks ticked off, I've still got 20 to get through. All right, we're gonna call this actual breakfast if I trained at 4:50, and maybe it happens at 7. So I give myself a few hours, and then I have a lunch, do a big one, 5 blocks. Now I've only got 15 blocks to go. I'll probably have dinner later on. We got 4 p.m. snack, 8 p.m. dinner. 5, game on. Have I finished? No, I've got 5 blocks that perhaps I could sprinkle around in here. Maybe it's a 2-block snack here, and I make these big 6s. I'm a huge unit. Still 1 block up. Can I get away with 2? I guess what I'm trying to show you there is that there's an ability to spread my food across the day. In light of fasting or intermittent fasting, this is where we have to be careful that we still get the required amount of calories. So I'm all for you experimenting with your diet, because it's yours, and observing whether or not things work for you or don't work for you. What I'm not a big fan of is zealous dogma that says, this has worked for me, so it must work for everybody else. And we all know someone like that. It's cool to be excited about what you've found works for you, but it's not cool to try and push that onto everybody else. So if you are currently lost with your diet, what my suggestion is come up with a start point. How much do I need each day? You could do a basal metabolic rate calculator and then turn that number of calories by dividing it by 100. So if I've got 2,000 calories or 1,800 calories, that ends up being 20 blocks or 18 blocks. Once I know how many blocks I've got, I start looking at meals rather than them being just food. Is it how much carbs are in there, how much protein is in there, how much fat is in there? Now, if we look at this compared to other nutritional guidelines, this is higher on the protein prescription. So protein is suggested to be required at 0.8 grams per kilograms of body weight for most people, so it averages out, a little bit more for men, a little bit less for women. But you can have healthy effect, or research suggests there's healthy effect anywhere up to 2.5 to 3 times. And that's what's suggested for endurance athletes that may consume body mass, or bodybuilders that are trying to put on body mass. So this lives somewhere around, if I'm a 80 kilo person and I'm consuming 20 times 70, 140, I'm just under that too. I'm like 1.8 times 1.8 grams of protein per kilo of body mass. Just in case you were wondering if there's enough protein. All right, so to summarize what I've sort of prattled on about, practically, if you're unsure of when you should eat, first of all, you need to know how much you're eating all day. Then I want you to play around with having a little something to eat. Start small, give yourself some time, and feel how you are when you exercise. Feel good? That could be right. Play with a little more, feel shitty, it's too much. Play with a little less, don't feel energized, you get the picture. If I'm feeling average, maybe I can get more time before I eat. Maybe I don't eat until afterwards. But these are well and truly variables for you to control. What's important is that you treat it like a science experiment. It is. You're your own experiment, and the better that you can understand how well you respond to certain foods, the quicker you'll have a recipe for success, a secret to success for you that you should stick to whenever you feel like it's not working. Go back to what you did before that worked. I'm going to wrap that up there because I don't want this to be too long and too ranty. I would obviously be keen for your feedback. Feel free to yell at me. 3, 2, 1.